So something comfy. If you want to use that blanket towel prop, feel free, but feel supported on your spine is the thing that we're most looking for. Feel into how the breath is expanding and contracting the torso. And let's give ourselves about 30 more seconds here. Just feeling into the breath, settling into the spine. And as you're as you're ready, let's bring the knees into a bent position if they're not already there, and then pull your right thigh in towards your rib cage, fingers interlaced over that shin or hamstring. Give a little bit of compression at the hip capsule, and then maybe you add a little bit of movement with the hand manipulation on that upper tibia fibia, and that allows for some hip movement and some entire leg movement from that. And then we'll release the right leg and take that over to our left side. We'll just start to bring that little bit of movement kind of just below the knee, just swaying there. And that allows the entirety of the leg to move, kind of focuses the movement right at the femoral head. And we'll let the left foot return to mirror the right. Bottoms of both feet come together, knees fall out wide. Opening up the medial line of the hips here. Pay attention to the arch of the back. No real requirement to adjust, but make sure it's not putting you into a space where you're uncomfortable. Last 10 seconds or so here. And when you're right, let's bring the knees back to neutral and let the knees fall to one side or the other, whatever side feels best for you. From that lateral edge, press up into staff. So torso gets vertical, legs can extend. Remember that you don't need to extend the legs fully. You can still have some subtlety of the bend. And we'll take the torso forward into a seated forward fold. No, again, no forcing of the shape here, just kind of drifting into what feels supportive and comfortable. And allow that to just be where you can breathe. Feel into how the breath is expanding and contracting once again. And soften into any places of discomfort or dis-ease. We're gonna give ourselves 30 more seconds here. So a good long seated forward fold right out of the gate, but enough time to explore the shape, feel into the shape, and note anything that doesn't feel right or that could feel better. It's probably a better way to say that. And as you're right, we'll walk the spine back towards vertical and transition to hands on knees tabletop. We'll get a little bit of our activity out of the way. Set up wrist, elbow, shoulder stack. Splay the fingers out wide. Shift the weight forward into those fingertips and keep the fingertip energy as you sink back towards child's pose. So we really want the arms to be active here. You know you've lost the activity in the fingers if the elbows start to bend and you start to soften into that shape. Strength through the entirety of the arm structure. We'll pull forward to tabletop, curl the toes, and lift the seat into down dog. And as we get back into this down dog, just note how we feel, note what feels good, what feels like it could expand further. And let's walk forward to fold. Inhale to half lift. And exhale to fold. Settle into the fold. See if that seated forward fold can impact this first standing forward fold. Can you relax into the knees? Can the posterior chain soften? Can the head get closer to the feet, to the floor? And then once you've maximized that capacity of fold, of length, of space, sacrum awareness, roll yourself up, stacking the vertebrae all the way up to mountain, head, neck, last things to align with the rest of the body. Squeeze into the core, squeeze into the quads, squeeze into the glutes. Beautiful adjustment, Annie. Let the inhale breath fill your lungs and bring the hands to heart center. And then exhale and feel the shoulders just soften back towards the back of your mat without the belly going forward. And then we'll take an inhale breath in and we'll hold the breath in. So lungs are full, breath is full. Hold that until it feels uncomfortable to hold the breath. And then just exhale and feel the shoulder blades soften back just a little bit more. And it's back, not down. We really want to make sure we're not slumping into this shape, but energizing back into expansiveness across this anterior shoulder girdle. And yeah, that's a good space. And then keep that expansiveness. We're going to inhale in, fill the lungs once again, hold that breath in, and sweep the arms up and overhead until it feels uncomfortable once again. So lungs are full, torso is nice and neutral. And then when it feels uncomfortable, exhale the hands to heart center. And slide the hands to the front of the thighs. Take a half fold so the head points out towards the front of the room, top of the head, gazes straight down. And then because we have the hands on the thighs, there's a tendency to push the weight back into the glutes and to overextend the knees. take maybe a 5% bend in the knees, so that can't be possible. Then engage into the hands like you're trying to straighten the arms. For most of us, the geometry of our torso will not allow that to happen, but the effort is there to straighten the arms, which gives us some extra length. And then exhale and release the arm pressure into your fold. Feel that mid back expansiveness that you get as you release into this fold. And plant the hands, walk back to down dog. Try to roll the belly button up towards the spine just a little bit. Breath stays relatively normal, but we're pulling the belly button up. And as the belly button's lifting up, the weight shifts back to the hips a little bit more. Energize into the hands and get that space. A little bit of high calf insertion, low hamstring insertion likely becomes the play. And then we'll release to tabletop, lift the tops of the feet, and sink into child's pose. And this child's pose has none of the requirements that our first child's pose did with the upper body activation, the arm activation. So just think about how you can relax, how you can soften, how you can melt into this shape. And so there's this pair of badminton players, and they're on a elite level, Olympic level, world-class level of badminton play. And in the world in which they exist, badminton is the biggest thing that anybody cares about. It's all everybody talks about. They are like national heroes for the ability to excel at badminton. Last 15 seconds here. When you're ready, fingers are going to slide back in front of us. If they're not already there, we'll use an inhale breath to come forward to tabletop. And from tabletop, we are going to set the torso neutrality. So make sure belly's not collapsing. Make sure we're nice and neutral. There's a little bit of like lower abdominal activation that's kind of required to take that lumbar extension out of the shape. And then fill the lungs once again with the inhale breath. And as you fill the lungs, see if you can feel the lateral edge of the rib cage kind of pushing out beyond the arm placement. And then exhale without losing the lumbar spine, without collapsing the lumbar spine, we exhale. Inhale in once again. Really trying to feel the bottom of the rib cage pushing out towards the lateral edge of the mat. And then exhale. And then one more time, we're going to inhale. This time we'll hold the inhale breath in. So the lungs are full. You have this huge lateral expansion at the bottom of the rib cage. Keep the breath held in, curl your toes, and roll back into down dog. And then when it feels uncomfortable to hold the breath in, exhale. And as you're exhaling, push into that down dog and elongate the shape of down dog. And then we'll come back to hands and knees and sink back and into child's pose. Note where the body feels different from the previous expression of child's pose. See if the lateral line that you worked so hard on expanding with the breath has some additional sensation. Sometimes because of that additional sensation, we creep up or that additional expansiveness, really. It's not the sensation, it's the actual physical room. The sensations can creep up and you can feel some different interplay in the shoulder structure, in that unionization between the cervical spine and the torso. Think about relaxing into the whole posterior musculature. Don't worry, we're going to get onto our back so that we can make that happen. Last 5 seconds here in child's pose. When you're right, when you're ready, fingertips grip into the mat in front of us. If they're not already there, we inhale to tabletop and sweep the legs in front of us for staff once again. So we're back to our seated, traditional legs extended seated shape. And now we have some more torso awareness, some more torso expansiveness. Get the shoulders to roll back, place the cervical spine so that the head, kind of the nose, chin is neutral with the sternum. And let's take that 3 cycles of big, full awareness on the inhale. So you take the inhale breath in, you feel the expansiveness, and then exhale, try to maintain the shape. Inhale, we take the breath in, and we exhale. Inhale, we'll take the breath in, hold, and with the hold, we'll drift to fold. And then when it no longer feels comfortable to hold the breath, we exhale and sink into that shape. And now pay attention how that mid back that we've started to bring some pliability to just blossoms into the fold as you exhale into this release, and really allow that interplay of the gravitational force on the torso to be helpful here. So that really does require that we get the torso weight forward of the hips. And if we have super tight hamstrings, that can only happen by bending the knees, right? So if the hamstrings are really limiting the fold capacity to this flexion of the upper back because we're just so rigid in the lower body, we need to take that rigidity out of the shape so that the weight can shift forward, kind of shoulder space, and gravity can elongate the body there. Yeah, it's beautiful, Skip. Last 10 seconds here. And when you're right, we'll walk the spine back to vertical. Bend both knees and let the feet come together. So a seated butterfly shape. Ideally, the toe mounds are pressed together, but I'm not going to be super duper focused on that. So the hands just come to wherever feels appropriate and comfortable. It can be toe mound, it can be ankles, it can be shins. It could be hamstrings, really. It's just somewhere where they feel comfortable. And then we're going to use that same breath cycle. The inhale 3 times. The 3rd time we hold, then we'll go into this seated forward fold, then we'll exhale. So let's take a big full inhale breath in, get the torso tall, get the chin in line with the sternum. Exhale out without losing any of that space. Inhale in. And exhale out. Last time we inhale in and hold. With the lungs full, we take ourselves forward. And we take ourselves forward to the full depth capacity. And then we hold for as long as feels comfortable. As soon as it doesn't feel comfortable to hold, we exhale out. And with the exhale comes the additional space that we had filled with the expansion of the lungs. So now the fold becomes deeper, the gravitational play becomes more intense. We'll breathe for another 50 seconds here. Medial line of the hips opening. This is likely a deeper version of this fold. This is a fold that we revisit pretty frequently, but because of that extra breath play, we're likely a little bit deeper. You may feel this a little more on that medial line, that inner groin abductor area. Last 10 seconds. And as you're right, we come back up to vertical. Let's grab our blanket and give that a roll that you know is supportive of your neck. So for some of us, that might be a full roll. For some of us, that might be a 3/4 roll or a half roll. But we want that to be under the cervical spine. And then we'll lower our head down so that I always aim to have the back of the head touching the mat or almost touching the mat. And that gives you a pretty good indication that the blanket depth is enough to open up the cervical spine into this little bit of extension. Legs can be bent. The bottoms of the feet could be together, although that is a pretty delicate space right now. Or the legs can be extended, whatever feels most comfortable for you. I want the awareness to be on the settling into the extension of the cervical spine. So we're thinking about the chin being encouraged, almost, I don't know, a word that's just a little bit less than forced, right? It's not forced into this shape, but it is certainly encouraged to be in this extension space. Imagine recreating the opposite of computer or cell phone shape, right? Computer or cell phone shape has the middle of the neck bowed out and the chin tucked. We want the middle of the neck pressed or encouraged forward and the chin lifted. And again, this may feel a little bit more intense than the previous iterations that you've been in this shape with me. And a lot of that is because of the work we've done on that mid back release, so that there is just more room for expansiveness throughout the whole torso, anterior and posterior chain. And we're going to give ourselves about 35 more seconds here. And now we'll start to mobilize the chin for a little lateral sway, so that as the chin moves delicately left to right, the back of the head, the levitator musculature on either side of the cervical spine can receive a little compression, massage, but also we start to give the cervical spine the ability to subtly rotate in this extension position, which is something that you almost never do, right? Our head obviously has the capacity to look up, but looking up and then rotating is something Think about the last time you did that. Unless you go to a lot of air shows, we probably haven't done that very often. And we'll play here for about 30 more seconds. Just subtle movement, trying to get the recalibration of that cervical spine stack, the scaffolding back into alignment. And as you're ready, we can slide our prop out from underneath us. That can come to one side or the other. And just settle back. This is the first time that we've settled back since we've done all of our movement components. So give your body a moment to integrate. Check where your default chin positioning is, right? There's a neutral plane underneath you. So in theory, everything is super duper neutral, but just see if there's a tucking of the chin that is more natural for you. And if there is, see if you can just lift back to a little more neutrality. Last 5 seconds to just settle in here. And when you are ready, let's take both knees to a bent position if they're not already there. Slide the left ankle across the right thigh. Take the left hand to the inner edge of the left thigh and push that left thigh away from you for a little external hip rotation. Ideally, we are straightening into the left arm so that we don't have to use the strength of the musculature of the arm. We can use the structure, the scaffolding of the upper and lower arm bones to create the stability and the shape. And then as you are, so let's get the arm as straight as we can get it. Ideally, we can get it straight. If the hip doesn't have that capacity, then the hip doesn't have that capacity, right? We're not going to overforce that. But I want you to set the shape and then pay attention to the left side of your sacrum, and then delicately bend the left elbow and note what goes on in the lower body as the hip comes closer and closer to your torso. So think about how balanced you are when the hip relaxes completely, and squeeze into the core a pretty significant amount, maybe 20 to 30%. And then with that core squeeze, re-engage by pressing the left arm straight and try to keep the left side of the sacrum neutral. As the left side of the sacrum stays more neutral into the expansion, you can feel that right side soft tissue on the lumbar forced to respond to the length, and it may start to tighten up a little bit. If it does, see if you can soften through some exhale breath and get that sacrum musculature to really relax around the expansiveness. And relax the left arm. Release the left foot off the right thigh. Settle here. Pay attention to the level of settling in the sacrum, right and left side. likely that the left side is settling a little bit more. It might be pretty subtle, but a little bit more. And then we're going to take this to side 2. Right ankle comes across the left thigh. Right hand to that inner edge, and we'll push and extend away. Just starting with a regular push to begin with, just kind of pressing into the expansiveness, straightening into the arm, mirroring what we did on side 1. And then we'll soften into the right elbow. As you soften into the right elbow, pay attention to how the right sacrum responds, how the hips rebalance, and then lock that in with core squeeze. With the core squeezed, we push the right thigh away. A little bit more balance across the sacrum as you go into the second side. And when you feel like you've had enough, we relax the right arm, release the right foot, and really settle across the sacrum. Pull with the sacrum as kind of a point of focus, pull both thighs in towards the rib cage, hands come to the shins. Squeeze and compress here. Kind of a modified happy baby. We're going to head towards a full happy baby, but we're going to do it in stages. So just opening up that space first, and then release your left foot down to the mat. Take the right leg, knee as bent as can be, so that you can reach up with that right hand to the lateral edge. If that's not available for the foot, use the ankle. And compress the right thigh down towards the edge of your rib cage, that lateral edge. Now, we're re-experiencing the same problem we just had with that external hip rotation, which is that the shortness of the hips requires the sacrum to compromise its positioning. So the left side of the sacrum here is trying to anchor as the right side lifts up and the torso wants to rotate. Think about driving that right side down. The knee getting closer to the torso helps. And you can see my knee is pretty far, I don't know a good way to show that, outside of that lateral edge. So it's beyond the width of my rib cage. And relax the right leg so that it mirrors the left. Let the arms just open up towards cactus. Add a little lateral sway to the knees. You can feel the asymmetry across the hip engagement here. Try to really settle into that. So there are certain perks that come with being top line badminton players, especially in this world where badminton is the focus, the conversation of every being. Oh, some of the nice things are, you very rarely pay for a meal when you go to a restaurant. You never wait in a line. People are always focusing their attention on you. And at the same time, there are certain drawbacks. Let's take this to the second side. So we're going to pull both thighs in towards the rib cage once again, hands to the shins or hamstrings. compress and widen. Widen is probably the right word. So compressing thighs and widening the knees towards the lateral edge, towards the armpits. Eventually, we'll release that right foot down and our left foot will head towards the ceiling. Hand comes to the lateral edge, either of the foot, the ankle, or the calf. And then we start to draw energetically down into that left side of the sacrum. And we don't often think of the sacrum as, at least in this granular a level, when we're thinking about happy baby. Sometimes they'll say, make sure your sacrum's connected. But here we're really working on balancing the distribution. So at the same time, there are these detriments as well. And there's part of the detriment is there's a lot of attention focused on you. Part of the benefits are you get to go meet huge political figures and they go meet the head of the country. And part of the downfall is he assigns them a coach, something that they never really felt like they needed nor wanted. When you feel like you've had enough on this second side, left foot comes back down to mirror the right, arms to cactus, and we go back to that sway into the hips. A lot of room into the hips now. Thinking about settling that space into your body, absorbing that space into your body, not pushing that space away so that you shrink back to where you were at the start of class. And so he assigns them this coach, and this coach comes to all of their practices, all of their meets, and that he basically offers nothing. He's just become an expenditure, a forced expenditure for this team. So they're not super happy to have him around. And one day, these two partners are talking about their recent badminton game and how easy the win was. And their coach kind of offhandedly mentioned something about racket care. And give yourself about 20 more seconds just to smooth everything out. And then we're going to work back to neutral and get into our full happy baby. So just note that you want the hips nice and relaxed. Last 5 seconds of knee sway. And we'll come back to neutral with the kneecaps. Pull both thighs in towards the torso. Now we have a lot of hip load here. Pulling the knees towards that lateral edge. We'll reach down towards the lateral edge of the feet or the ankles or the calves, and we'll open up towards a complete traditional happy baby. For most of us, the weight wants to roll up onto the shoulders. I want you to think about using the lower abdominals and the lower obliques to really push the sacrum down. Like you are, again, shoulders are anchored, but you're using that lower abdominal musculature to elongate the shape. Something that we don't generally think of. We generally think of like, how high can we get the feet? This is a different utilization of happy baby here. So really squeezing into that lower abdominal region. And we're going to hold this for 10 more seconds. Then relax. Feet come back down to the mat. Feet head out to the width of the mat and knees fall in towards midline to rest. And we want the hips to be deactivated here. That's our goal. This coach says something about racket care, and they both kind of look at each other, and then they look at this coach and they're like, what do you know about badminton? And he's like, oh, I've never really played badminton before, but I do know that you want to keep your rackets nice and tuned up. And they're like, we don't care about our rackets. And one of them picks up a racket and he smashes it on the ground. Like, we get free rackets anytime we want. Companies pay us to use these things. He picks up another racket and he smashes it on the ground. He says, racket care isn't the thing we're concerned about, man. So, like, I know we're forced to have you around here because the head of our country told us we had to, but just be quiet and sit in the corner. And the two of them go back to talking about this big, like, World Cup level event around badminton that's coming up. And because these two are so skilled at their craft, they're not talking about the qualifier game or the quarterfinals or the semifinals. They are exclusively focused on this other highly skilled team that they expect to meet in the finals. And their conversations are related to how they're going to beat that one specific team. Give ourselves about 30 more seconds here with the knees in and the hips deactivated, and really thinking about the deactivation of the hips and how that is interplaying with the relaxation of the lumbar, the relaxation of the mid back, the relaxation of the thoracic spine. Right when you're ready. Let's bring the knees back out to the width of the feet, the ankles, and then walk the feet back in line with the hips. The knees will follow. Bring the feet all the way together. Let the bottoms of the feet come together and the knees fall out wide once again. And feel into the expansiveness of this shape, even in comparison to the last time we were in this about 15 minutes ago. And feel into the fluidity of your breath. We'll give ourselves about 20 more seconds. Feeling this medial expansion into all of this room we've created around the hips. And then when you're right, inhale, knees come back to neutral. And exhale, knees fall over towards the left. And we settle here. Now, the hip torso integration could be a little bit unfamiliar because of the openness of the hips. Adjust like you normally would so that there's a sense of ease, which may mean that you stack the hips, that you pull that left hip a little bit towards midline and allow for a more stacked hip structure itself. It may mean that you want to not go as deep into the top leg twist. So maybe you drop that knee down towards the arch of the foot, or maybe you want to go in a little bit deeper and you want to extend that leg across the body and open it up into a fuller, more full expression of the twist. So listen to the cues from the body, offer what will be most beneficial for the body, and settle. Whatever feels right. So these two show up at this World Cup-esque event and they play their qualifier game. And before the qualifier game, they're watching a film of an opposing team, but it's not the team they're going to play in the qualifier. It's the team they expect to play in the finals. And this coach like figure comes in and he says, that's not, you guys are watching the wrong film. And they shake their head and they say, oh, old man, like, stop bothering us. And they completely ignore him and they go back to watching the film. And they go out and they play the qualifier and they win. They win relatively easily, but they don't look perfectly sharp. And there's a little bit of talk about that on the world stage. It wasn't as easy as it maybe should have been. We're going to give ourselves 30 more seconds here in this first side twist. But they advance as expected, as was destined, essentially, and they move on to the quarterfinals. And again, before the quarterfinals, they're watching film of this other team. Coach comes in, he sees that it's not the right team. They're watching this team they expect to play in the finals. And he says, guys, this is the wrong film. You're watching the wrong, you're about to play a different team. And they blow him off again. They're like, old man, stop. You don't know anything about badminton. You don't know anything about us. You're just here because you were forced to be here. When you're right, when you're ready, knees return back to neutral. And we'll exhale over to that second side, right side. Once again, we go through the diagnostics of what would be the most beneficial. Is it pulling that right hip closer to midline? Is it softening the twist by dropping the left knee back towards the left side of the mat? Or is it extending that left leg fully across the body and deepening the twist? All of those are correct. They're just not all correct for each of us, right? Only one of those options or a variance of one of those options is going to be correct for you. Let me just breathe into the second side. So they go out and they play this quarterfinals game after watching this other tape, and they play okay, pretty good. They win pretty easily, but again, they just don't look their sharpest. And again, it's kind of like conversation on the world stage because they're just expected to do these things and they're expected to be perfect. And it's just the expectation they've built from their skill is that they will never have an issue. And we're going to give ourselves 30 last seconds on this second side. And they advance to the semifinals. And sure enough, on the other side of the bracket is the team they expect, and they watch them win their game to advance to the finals. And they do more tape study on that team that they're expecting to play in the finals. When you're right, when you're ready, knees return back to neutral. Body settles back to neutral. Balance on the left and right side of the hips, of the sacrum, of the shoulders, left and right side of the head. the legs, the arms, everything is neutral. Let your eyes close. Ask yourself if there's anything, any movement that might be beneficial before you settle into Shavasana. And if there is, offer that. And if there's not, if you're ready, if you're just perfectly balanced, drift into a shape, into a state where you can fully appreciate Shavasana this morning. And so this old man comes in, he sees them watching the competition play. And he reminds them one last time, it's like, hey, this is not where the focus of your energy should be. And they blow them off. Sure enough, they go out, play their semifinals, and they stun the world when they lose. Start to bring some movement to your fingers and your toes, your wrists and your ankles, elbows, knees, shoulders, freedom of your hips start to move. Neck and head start to move. Eventually, we'll bring enough movement into our body that we can transition from the seat we are in back into a seat. And in the seated space, spine gets tall, breath gets fluid, eyes closed. And we'll inhale our hands together at heart center. Over the course of the next 7 days, can you remind yourself that while you have the freedom to worry about tomorrow as much as you want, any energy spent doing so is pulling away from your capacity today? And see how that changes your experience. Thank you so much for being a part of this morning's practice and for being you. Namaste. Happy Sunday, guys. Appreciate the heck out of you being here. Love the heck out of you. I will be back next week to do the recharge thing again. And if you want to move, we'll do that tomorrow night. Would love to see you. Love the heck out of you. Have a beautiful rest of your day. Bye.